Yes, first I want to say thank you for all of those who have supported us throughout this situation. I do deeply regret the role that I played in the incident that night, but I can say that I am happy that we continue to work through it together.
Last week, when TMZ revealed video of what Ray Rice actually did to his fiancée, now his wife, on that elevator in Atlantic City, many women took to social media using the hashtags WhyIStayed and WhyILeft. Today, Meredith Vieira shared her story of abuse.
So I want to explain to you why I stayed. I was in an abusive relationship many, many years ago as a young woman. I've talked a little bit about this. And it started out, I love this guy. It started out with we would have a fight and he'd just sort of grab my arm. And I didn't think a lot about it. And then it turned into pushing me against the wall. And then it went beyond that to actually taking his hand and grabbing my face and saying, I could ruin your career if I wanted to, and no one would want you. Now, this is going on. I'm a smart woman. A lot of people say, well, who would stay in that situation? Somebody who maybe doesn't have the wherewithal to get out, the means to get out. I had that. I had a job at the time. And I kept in this relationship, and I've done a lot of thinking about why, and I think part of it was fear. I was scared of him, and scared if I tried to leave, something worse could happen to me. Part of it was guilt, because every time we'd have a fight, he would then start crying and say, I promise I won't do it again, and I would feel like maybe I contributed somehow to this, and they're saying this about Ray Rice's wife, that, it takes two to tango. And then there was the night that we shared an apartment, and he threw me into a shower naked in scalding water, and then he threw me outside into the hallway. We lived in an apartment building, and I hid in a stairwell for 2 hours until he came again crying and said, I promise I won't do this again. And I continued to stay in that relationship until I was offered a job in another state, and that's where I felt I had the ability to get away. So when people talk about domestic violence, it is really, really a complicated issue. It's not so easy to just get away. You think it would be, but it is not. Having said that, if my daughter Lily, who's now 21, was in an abusive relationship, even if she thought she loved this man, I'd say, go. Just go. We didn't have shelters when this was happening to me, and there was no hotline. I'd say call the hotline. If you're going through this, get yourself to a shelter, but by all means, tell somebody what's going on. Let somebody know. That's just my experience with it, and I just know that it's rampant in this country, and we all have to accept the fact that it's not just an issue with the NFL, it's an issue in all of our lives, and until we take it seriously, more and more women are going to get abused, no question about it.
Joining me now, the creator of the hashtag WhyIStayed, Beverly Gooden. Beverly, it has been extraordinary to hear these stories emerging. First, for me, last week, watching them on Twitter, just the amazing little accounts that could be squeezed into the size of a tweet. And then you hear someone like Meredith Vieira. It seems there's been an opening that this has created for these stories, like nothing that's really ever occurred in our public discussion of it before.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When I created the hashtag, I didn't imagine that it would become this much of a movement. It would become this big. I was just, angry at the response to the video, how everyone was asking Janae Rice why she stayed and, putting the blame on her for her being the victim of a crime as opposed to him. And so when I created it, I was just kind of, angrily responding to that response, and it just kind of turned into something else. And I think that speaks to how big of an issue this is, how intricate it is, how it affects people from all income levels, regardless of race or socioeconomic status. And so it's become something that's really important, and I'm excited that everyone's talking about it now and listening to the voices of people who survived.
One of the big things that I think is one of the easiest things for people to understand, because what Meredith was talking about there involves a complex set of romantic and complicated psychological interactions, but what it doesn't include is the economic problem of I cannot afford to leave. I want to leave. I would love to walk out that door, but if I walk out that door, I'm homeless. And, and I've talked to many people over the years where that was the problem. The economics of leaving were prohibitive.
And it's a reality. It's a reality a lot of people face. In my situation, he was the breadwinner. He controlled the finances. And if I left him, I left everything that I had. You know, I had nothing without this person who funded our whole life. So it's a reality. I think it's important and it's valid, and it's something that people really have to take into account. When someone is saying, you know, I can't leave, that may be the issue. It could be financial, it could be economic, it could be love, it could be fear. You know, all of these reasons that we've seen come out via the hashtag, they're all important and they're all valid.
And there's also, I think, in some cases, an issue of identification where the relationship is a large part of a person's identification. I am the wife of the head of this hospital, or in the case of the football player, I am the wife of this NFL star. I'm an NFL wife. There's a unique status to that, and you see that in some of the things that Janae has said, where she says things like, you know, I love you, Ravens Nation. I mean, it's almost like these are the perfect NFL wife phrasings that are going on there. Yeah. And being an NFL wife may be, and I can't speak for her, we're not inside her head, but to generalize to others, something like that could be a very large part of a person's identification. And you know, walking out the door ends that particular part of your identification.
Right, and identity is important, especially when you've built a life with someone and that person is who you're with and who you plan to be with. And it's not so easy to just, you know, say, hey, walk away, when this person is part of your identity, and you may even have a child together. But, you know, your identity is tied up with that. So that's definitely, you know, an issue. It's yet another reason why people stay.
And Beverly, quickly before we go, the part Meredith was talking about where now suddenly the guy is crying. I mean, there's a very, very dramatic response on the guy's part, going to the height of drama to be able to hold on to her and pull her back in.
And it really speaks to how the domestic violence situation can mess with your mind. You know, on one hand, you have someone that's hurting you, but on the other hand, you have someone that you love and you see is hurting. So you want to take care of them, you want to hold them, you want to fix it. And so it's very complex. I love that Meredith said it was complicated, because it is. There's so many elements, and I think we have to start addressing all of those elements before making a judgment.
Beverly Gooden, thanks for joining us, and thank you very much for starting the Why I Stayed stories that we've all been reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, one of the members of Congress who voted against arming